Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at Thoughtexchange. We're going to be talking about building a happier and healthier workplace. I'm really excited to be moderating our panel today of a very interesting guest. And what we'll be doing, for those of you who haven't been to a Thoughtexchange virtual event where we talk with panelists, is that we encourage each of our panelists to talk for several minutes about an area specifically that they're passionate about the topic. And then at the end of the three different speakers, we run an exchange for the Q&A for all of the speakers together. Today, I just actually had an experience recently where I thought it was a great idea for me to post the exchange link at the beginning and throughout, so that if you have a question for one of our speakers and you're worried you won't remember, instead of dropping it in the chat, that you can use the exchange periodically throughout their speaking. And then at the end of the three, I will put the link back up again for additional questions. So that was all my logistics. So now I'm going to start to introduce people. Our first speaker is going to be Devin Silver, and Devin is the wellness coordinator at the Forensic Psychiatric Hospital, and she's going to be our first speaker. Our second speaker is going to be Greg Swain, who's a corporate wellness advisor at MetroLife, and we're going to be closing it out with Stephanie Woodward, who's a psychological health and safety advisor at Agency to Change. And so that's the order we're going to be going in. And so I'd like to kick it off. First, I'm just going to grab the exchange link as I promised here. So I'm going to stop sharing and grab my link here. So if you can see the link right in here, there's a QR code, and we're also going to be dropping the link in the chat right now. And so what you're seeing right here is the QR code. If you've never used one, just hold your phone up on a camera. So put the camera, hold the phone up, don't take a picture, you just click on the pop-up and that will get you into the exchange. And essentially, I just wanted you to leave it open so you can ask questions to the panelists throughout, so you don't have to remember. If you have a question for a specific panelist, be it Devin, Greg, or Stephanie, I would like you to put their name in the question. So if it's specifically for them, put their name in the question. And if it's just a general question, no need to do that, because I will be fielding all those general questions. So now that everybody's got their housekeeping underway, I thought we would kick it off with Devin. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'll be talking about.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, technical fun. I'm on a little tiny phone this morning. So I work at the Forensic Hospital. So if anyone's wondering what that is, it's kind of a secure hospital from minimum to maximum for patients. And we have a pile of mental health professionals working there. I've been there for just about 18 years now and been very passionate about taking care of our staff and helping out leadership on how to take care of staff. So what I was going to tell you guys today is a little bit about how we try to keep a kind of a culture of connection at work, and some ideas on some things I've done over the years on how to build some of that connection and community. So just to kind of start off, I'll keep my time going here. You have some amazing speakers coming after me, so I got to save some time. I don't have any slides today, but I just I jotted down a few notes of some things I was thinking about when it comes to workplace mental health. And the thing I keep coming back to is the ideas of connection and the ideas of community. So if you think about connection, basically as all humans, we are wired biologically in need for connection. And the good news is, amongst all the hardships that are going on in the world right now and the struggles that people are having, is that we are also biologically wired to get through hard things, which is the good news. We've been doing it for hundreds of years, getting through hard things. And I'm going to say that the reason that we're able to do that is through the idea of connection, through the idea of being co-regulated by people around you and by having a sense of community around you. So at my workplace, for example, we really try to promote that. I must say, I have the most amazing team that I get to lead at work. And we are like a little work family, and I credit our survival in a really tough workplace to our work community. So we do things like we find any ways possible to connect. So every morning we're together, whether it's on Zoom or in the office, we spend that 10 minutes where I look them all in the eyes, I get to say their names, and I get to see and hear them every morning. We also do things like we've set up yoga on Fridays, sometimes over Zoom. And we've set up every Thursday, we meet over lunchtime with all the organization across the province, really, and do online meditation. Again, just seeing people in their eyes and connecting with them in some form. So I always think of everything I do through that lens. Am I building connection? Am I building community? And remembering that basically people at the end of the day all just want to be seen and heard. So doing wonderful things like we've set up a wellness room, for example, at my workplace that was basically a response out of things are really tough for the nurses right now. We see that things are really tough. We hear you, and here's how we're going to provide or do our piece to help. So we set up a room that nurses on the max unit can go to. They can have, it's COVID friendly, so they can have their individual tea, they can have food. Always providing a snack, and tea is always a wonderful way to people's hearts. And just giving them a place to go and to be able to rest is amazing. Whether it's, and I guess the other point too is I feel like there's lots of things you can do. You can do all these connection things, and you have some speakers coming on after to talk about some amazing things you can do in your workplace. And I always think no matter what you're doing, you also have to be it. So if you're not embodying connection, if you're not really showing up for your staff as their leader that they can lean into, it's not going to matter what you're doing. You need to actually be it. So I try to be the example, or there's someone that had that quote, be the change you want to see. So I try to show up and do whatever it is I need to do to take care of myself, so that I can show up and be there for my team, and that I can see and hear my team, and be emotionally regulated so that I can regulate my staff when they're having a hard time. And thinking about how do I do that? How do I show up? And thinking about the importance of doing things like, I'm pretty well known to be able to, if I'm having a hard time, shut my door, right? Meditating across my door and sitting down for 15 minutes. Because I know if I don't take breaks, and if my staff doesn't see me taking breaks, they're not going to feel permission to do it themselves. So you need to be that example of mental health for your team, so that they feel that permission that they can take pause, because they're like, oh, if Devin's taking lunch break, I can probably take lunch break. And I can guarantee you that if I'm running through my whole day, my staff's going to be feeling that energy and basically do the same thing. So those are some of the things that we do. And then acknowledging my team, like just saying, you know, that I see you, I noticed you're doing a good job. People really like to hear from you and to be recognized. So not to take too long here, let me check. I'm watching myself on time here. So I guess if my two things I can say at the end of the day are build a community at work, whatever that looks like, bring people together, know that people being together literally settles your nervous system. Think about anytime someone you love comes in the room, your body chemistry is just like, you settle down. So if we can do that for one another at work and checking in and connecting with one another in whatever wild fashion we need to these days with technology, but just connect, build community at work, see your people at work, feel what they're going through, and then be there for them to lean into and provide resource and be that kind of alpha leader at work. So I'm going to pause there.
Well, I want to thank you for that, Devin. So I just want to remind everybody, if they have a question specifically for Devin, or just one that's popped in your mind, to click on the link that we have in the chat it says the My Thought Exchange scroll link, as well as write Devin's name if it's specifically for her. Devin, I just wanted to say first, I really enjoyed what you were saying about connection and community and the idea of putting everything through a filter. I think when you simplify it like that, it seems so obvious to ask yourself, what are you doing for your work community and how you're connecting with people? And you mentioned looking in people's eyes several times. I don't know if you did, about like seeing their eyes, look in their eyes. And I think again, in this sort of culture, I call it of imagined emergency that we're in all the time, is that we're just not spending that time to even just be present, even if it's only for a couple of minutes, to really care about how people are and to see what's going on with them. So, and then the other part about that, you have to show up like it. You use the Gandhi quote, to be the change you want to see in this world. And, I remember years ago, there was this old like leadership book that's like so 90s, but I remember one of the pages just said, leaders go first. That was it, like whatever it is. And I believe that that's so important. And, people often think of that in more sort of, logistical leadership moments versus in necessarily mental health. But I like that you've brought up that whole leaders go first piece. So with that, we are going to Greg. So Greg, maybe a couple words about yourself and what you'll be talking about. And if you want to show some slides, feel free to grab hold of the screen.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction, and I appreciate you having me here today. For everyone at Thoughtexchange, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm speaking to you all today as a former frontline employee who spent the past 2 decades serving community through community service organizations and nonprofit organizations, working frontline, typically in a care setting or a healthcare setting. And one thing that I've noticed over my years is that when you're working in a nonprofit environment or a small business environment where there's not a lot of funds that you can allocate to your employees and how they can take some time to have either enjoy benefits or perks in the workplace, that's something that you don't often see. It shows that it pays to be resourceful in those types of settings as well. And for the past 2 years, since 2018, we've been focusing a lot of our resources that we have towards working on employee mental health programs and ways that we can better the at-work experience for our staff teams. But the problem is that there are budget cuts and there are restrictions on where we can spend money and how we present our budget and who can approve it. So what we've done is we've taken an opportunity to look online and grab resources that were free to use and find them and start building a resource library that we could actually share with people that found themselves in the same position as we were in, which was we didn't have resources to put together a functional mental health program that would cost a significant amount of money. And we wanted to find a way that we can positively impact the lives of our employees as quickly as we could and actually be able to generate some sort of a turnaround and maybe even start generating income from the improved work experience that we were providing them by reducing absenteeism or presenteeism and increasing productivity. So the slide that you see right now is showing that Canadians fear repercussions if they admit that they have a mental illness, which may prevent them from getting the help that they need. So the problem with that is that they are coming to work and their focus might still be on whatever these issues are surrounding them, whether it's their work life or their home life, and it's preventing them from being the best that they can be. And that has a ripple effect towards whether it's your customers or the people that you take care of, or the type of work that you're producing, the products that you're producing, and the quality that they're being made. So we, like I said, had to find ways that we can create mental health programs or we can improve the work experience with no budget for it. So what we found was that in pulling out some of the papers and the reports that we were reading, particularly one from Maria Winslow, who works for RBC Insurance, showed that 63% of managers would benefit from having better training when it comes to mental health, and 43% of those managers that responded to that survey also mentioned that they needed additional support from human resources and senior management. So we found 2 different programs that were able to give people in management positions and senior management positions the training that they needed to understand what mental health was and mental health programming they can actually offer employers for no cost. And it was something that was going to give them a certificate from an actual recognized establishment. So that's the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety. And they have a mental health at work employment pack that you can actually use. And it's a 4.5-hour training program that gives you 4 different certificates. And at the end of it, you have a comprehensive understanding of mental health at work. You learn what you can do for yourself and others and for your team. And it helps you establish a mental health program, and it costs nothing to take it. So when we found that and started sharing it, we were able to find ways that we can alter existing resources, which we're going to be sharing in the chat link soon, that you can actually use these other resources and find ways that you can respond in real time to your employees' needs as they come up. Because the days of having just a EAP service, which are great and should be available to everybody, but that's not your final answer anymore. And you need something that's more comprehensive and something that's going to be able to address specific needs of your workplace. Because just like mental health, not every organization is going to have a solution that's going to work and cover all aspects of employee mental health. And what works for one organization isn't necessarily going to work for another one as well. So the research that we've done and the programs that we've begun to implement in these non-for-profits, as I said, they don't cost anything. There's something that you can take a look at today and start as early as tomorrow. And that's not an exaggeration. That's something that you can actually do if you genuinely want to see an improvement in your employees' everyday lives and how they navigate their mental health, both at home and at work. These are all resources that are free to use. They're available to anybody, so it doesn't matter if you're tuning in from the United States, Canada, anywhere in the world. They're accessible to you and your employees, and you can implement them straight away and start improving the lives of your teams. And there's plenty of resources out there for you to look into and to research and start rolling out. Where we come in and where this panel comes in is we start pointing you in the right direction as to which ones are right for you. And that's what I believe Stephanie is going to be touching on as well when she starts to speak, is the different components of what builds psychological safety in the workplace and how you address those needs. And based on your organization's needs, there's specific resources that are available to you that you can implement right away and start seeing positive results for your workforce.
Myself. Thanks so much, Greg. That was great. Again, if we can pop the link in the chat just for the exchange, if there's some questions specifically for Greg or that have just popped up in your mind right now. The chat's full of questions about, are you going to share these resources? So yes, after the event, we always send out a link to the exchange, and we'll send out all the links that we can to share with you, and even in slides if we're able to. I think what I really love about what you're talking about here, Greg, which I think is the accessibility by saying it doesn't have to cost a lot. I think most of us are concerned when we have to make a budget request. First of all, they take a long time. A lot of budgets are set, one time a year, and then we're trying to squeeze money and people are a little bit reluctant. And I think, unfortunately, that connection between mental health and productivity is still, not as well thought of as it would be for tools. So if you say we need the specific software, we need a specific tool, people will say, oh yeah, that's going to help productivity. If you say that we need like mentally healthy people to help productivity, there's a little bit more of like I don't know if that's like really where work has to get involved. So I like that you're talking about free resources. And I love this amazing idea of that training for leaders so that they feel more capable of talking about it. I think, again, when we're inviting people to have conversations around mental health, we have to make sure that leadership feels comfortable doing that, and that we're not sending people into situations where they feel that they've either said something wrong or made things worse. So thank you for that. So we're rounding it out with Stephanie Woodward. You want to say a couple of words about yourself and what you'll be talking about, Stephanie?
Hi, thanks, Des. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Woodward, and I am the founder of Agency to Change. And we are a boutique agency offering individual and team coaching, workshops, communications programming to embed and support psychological health and safety in the workplace. And it's all done through the lens of the National Standard on Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. I'm just going to share my screen and hope the technology gods are going to be with me here as we pull this up. So right here, you'll be able to see a little bit about the national standard on psychological health and safety in the workplace. Now, I recognize we do not have an exclusively Canadian audience, so I do want to point out while this standard is Canadian, it has been implemented and used as a best practice in organizations around the world. So it does have global applicability. I've worked with organizations in the US and the UK in putting some of this together. So this really is seen as a best practice worldwide. It is a voluntary standard right now in Canada, but as COVID and the pandemic started to ramp up, there were, in our national newspaper here, and there were comments going around saying, is it time for us to move from this being a voluntary standard to moving to something that's more mandatory, like an occupational health and safety, given the importance of mental health in the workplace. So we're starting to see that trend. So the more you can start to familiarize yourselves with some of these best practices, the more you're going to be, should this start to move to a mandatory place, you'll already be starting to make traction in the general direction of where it's headed. This standard is an evidence-based framework. A number of professional disciplines fed into it, and it identifies 13 measurable, evidence-based psychosocial factors. And what I love about them is that they are practical, they are implementable, and they can be adjusted for companies of all sizes and scaled to any budget. So it really is a framework that you can customize for your own workplace. And the standard speaks to an entire management system that includes these 5 components: really getting leadership buy-in, doing planning around what you're going to do to move the needle on psychological health and safety, how you're going to implement your program, and also looking at a feedback loop so that you're checking in to see, is what we're putting in place, is what we planned, is what we've implemented, is it having the effects that we want? How can we start to maybe tweak or adjust our plans? And that's done through a management review. So as I mentioned earlier, this is applicable industries, companies of all sizes, budgets of all sizes. You can really work this system in a number of different ways. So I want to introduce you to the factors. There's a lot here. I've purposely put questions there on the right-hand column that you can ask yourself. So when you go back and listen to the recording, you can work your way through these questions. But just to stay on time today, I'm just going to be introducing you briefly to what these 13 factors are. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got psychological support. So checking in to see how your employees are doing. There's the component of organizational culture. What's at play in your organization? What are the values? Clear leadership and expectations. From a leadership point of view, how are you communicating with people? How are you communicating change? Are people clear on what's expected of them? One of my personal favorites, civility and respect. This is free, and it goes such a long way to be civil and have respect for our coworkers in the workplace. So really creating an environment that allows for civility and respect. Psychological requirements. If there are questions around this one, I'll go into a bit more detail. This is really making sure you're matching up your roles to the psychological requirements and being really clear around those. Growth and development. Are you providing opportunities for your people? Are you recognizing and rewarding people, not just once a year, but what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Creating space for involvement and influence. Who's at your decision-making table? How are you including people in the decisions that are happening at your organization? Workload management. How are projects divvied up? How are you assigning work to people? Engagement. How are people feeling? Are they connected to their work? And balance, which is something that I think all of us in organizations right now during COVID, balance has been the topic of the day. How do you create balance across your work and your personal priorities? Psychological protection is really about, are people feeling seen, heard, and respected in the workplace? And finally, again, navigating our way through a pandemic, the protection of physical safety has become incredibly important from a wellness perspective, but this would also include harassment, bullying, and other policies that you would have in your organization. So those are the 13 factors. As Des has said, if there's any questions about those, feel free to put them into the thought exchange. What I thought might be helpful is to see what can you do, how could you start to put these factors into play right away? So I'm going to quickly just use COVID as an example to share what I was speaking to leadership teams about and people leaders of how they could manage through COVID, leveraging these factors. So if we take ourselves back to April when the pandemic was very new, I really thought that the focus should be on the 3 factors that are in the middle of this circle. So psychological support, checking in with your people as often as you could to say, how are you doing? And really meaning that. I loved Devin looking people in the eye, truly caring. Look them in the eye, ask them how they're feeling. It's not an eye roll. It's not a rhetorical question. Really checking in with how people are and how you can support them. Workload management, again, people were adjusting to virtual work. What was essential? What could you take off people's plates? So really being laser focused on workload management. And for leaders, some of the best leaders I knew were doing daily communications with their virtual teams to keep them updated on what was going on with the pandemic, what was changing in their workplaces. So really being really clear and sharing and communicating as much as possible. Now, if you had frontline staff, or if you were just looking to put in place protocols, obviously all of this was wrapped up. You can see there in the corner, protection of physical safety. Again, you can see how all the factors at play could really give you guidance during that time when COVID was first impacting all of us. We then moved to June. Psychological support, really important, but you would have noticed balance became a more important topic at that point. People were starting to adjust. They were getting used to being at home, but suddenly how do you balance your children and work? So companies that were really paying attention to that and talking to their employees about balance allowed for a more engaged workforce. So again, working these three factors, if you were placing your focus on these three factors in June, again, within that bubble of protecting the physical safety of your employees, you'd likely be moving the needle on psychological health and safety in the workplace. Finally, now as we come into September, October, and we're into the fall, I think clear leadership and expectations are becoming even more important. What does the future hold? What's happening with the business? How are you communicating with your employees? Involvement and influence as you start to think about return to work plans or not returning to work. How are you involving your employees in those decisions? Again, to let them have a say in what's going on, and how are you sharing that information back with them? Organizational culture, and I think again, going back to things that both Devin and Greg have said, what are you putting into your organizational culture to create a happy and healthy workplace? You know, how is community and connection a part of your workplace culture? And what does that look like virtually? If you're planning on being at virtual work for the next 6 months to a year, what is that going to look like from a culture perspective? And again, these are still all wrapped up in this idea of physical safety and protecting people's safety. I love to talk about these topics, so I've just included here. If you ever want to reach out and talk about them, please feel free. I nerd out all the time on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, so I'd love to hear from anyone. And I will bring that to a close. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. You know, I was trying to think, oh my gosh, I hope we get these slides, because I really love the 13 factors. These are all factors that we often think of for them promote engagement. We sort of put them in different factors, but I love how it's the idea of psychological safety versus just employee engagement, which I think it's almost a term that's been so overused, and it doesn't really touch on what engagement is. And you know, we're big fans at Thoughtexchange of using a pyramid similar to Maslow, where we talk about exchanges often show you where you are in the pyramid. So no matter what question you ask, people will respond for where they're at in the pyramids. You can ask them about strategy, you can ask them about long-term plans, and they'll be saying things like, I'm stressed that I'm not going to get promoted because my kids are at home and I can't get work done. Like, they'll answer you where they're at in the pyramid. And I like the idea of, if you set all these factors up, you're more likely to have people sort of thinking higher up because their basic needs are being taken care of. And again, I think that ties back a little bit to what Greg was saying, which is, how do we look at these factors as being really important for people to function at their highest level versus sort of soft, squishy things that we add to our benefits program to make ourselves more attractive as an employer. Because if we leave it in that category, it's in the like, meh, we do it, we don't do it, it doesn't matter, versus it's almost like we have an automobile that we never take for servicing and we don't expect it to ever break down. And I really like how all of you have talked about all the ways that we can tune up this human being so that this person feels their maximum capacity, and that we have to invest in that. So I'm going to just grab again the Exchange link here. Hopefully I still got it up. Here we go. So all we do here, for those of you who have not been on, where are we? It's so funny how you have one thing and then it's gone here. There we go. Can everybody see this? The link? Okay. So all I'm just asking is everyone to go into the Exchange so that you can participate in this wonderful discussion. Again, if you have a question specifically for either Devin, Greg, or Stephanie, put their name in the question so I can search for that. And if it's just a question that any of the panelists can answer, that would be wonderful if you can do that as well. So I'm just going to give us a couple of minutes to let everybody go in the Exchange. And of course, if you've never been in a Thought Exchange, what happens here is you share a question or a thought or an idea. And then when you're finished, you're going to rate the thoughts of others 1 to 5 stars, depending on how much they resonate with you. And then you can scroll to our Discover, which will show you sort of what the top thoughts are doing. And we're going to take, if you see, I have a timer going, about 3.5 minutes to do that right now. So inviting everybody in so that we can have a really great discussion now. And I invite the panelists, if you want to go into the exchange as well, feel free. I'm going to be leaving the exchange open, so I'm not going to shut it, so they can still participate as we're answering, but I just want to make sure we get a chance. So last couple of minutes of rating, seconds of rating, and then I'm going to start the questions, but again, continue if you'd like to continue to ask. So it looks like we have a winner of the exchange. If this is your question, feel free to feel really good about yourself. Stephanie, this is the first one for you. I haven't seen a lot that are actually specifically towards a person. So just so you know, panelists, I'm just going to be moving around with my questions, and I'm going to try not to have 3 of you answer the same one, because that just gets less done. So don't be offended if I just call on one of you and move on. Stephanie, please give an example of initiatives or you've gone down to number 2, practical applications that can be put in place.
Absolutely. So I saw this one coming up to the top, and I know Devin and Greg might also have ideas around this one. So if we have time, we can come back. But I think around the factors right now, organizational culture was a big one. So many companies have values that sometimes are just posters on the wall. So right now, I really encourage teams to bring those values alive for themselves. So if you're thinking about making traction on that culture factor, start to turn your values into specific behaviors that you can talk about within your team. So what does the value of respect mean for us? What does the value of diversity mean for us? And really get that down to practical behaviors that you can watch out for in each other and be accountable to one another for and share with one another. And especially in this virtual world, those values that you've been living with for a long time might look slightly different. So that would be an example: rewards and recognition, finding, opportunities and ways to have daily scrums or virtual ways of giving accolades to one another, or just saying thank you for a job well done, really making that time for rewards and recognition. So I'll pause there. If there's a specific factor that you'd like some practical examples on, feel free to jump in and let us know.
Thank you for that. And I do like the idea of clarifying what words mean, because words like trust, respect, communication, they're so overused. What does it really mean at our organization? And I think even that exercise of doing that as a team, just by doing it, it makes you aware of it. And then from the awareness can come change. So I love how you talked about that. Greg, how do you get support when you don't have leadership buy-in? And you talked a lot about trying to do things for free, but I thought even for free, it's a time commitment. So that 4.5 hours, what do you do when you don't have clear buy-in?
So one thing, this is an interesting question that came to me, because one thing that's not in my bio is that I'm still currently a frontline employee. So when I was starting a mental health program, we had interest from senior management, but they weren't necessarily all in on the idea of bringing out an entire application. So what I ended up doing is, and what I suggest to other people to do, especially people that are frontline and looking to be that change that they want to see within their organization, is that you can take, there's actually a tool that I left in the chat box as one of the links, and it's healthy break activities. And what I did was I started, I printed them off, and you can break them into different elements. So you can have calming, you can have team, you can have individual type breaks. And they're just different ideas that you can do to spend your 15, your 30, or your hour-long breaks at work. And it gives people healthier options than going to a dark corner and getting on their phone and playing like a brick buster game or something like that. It gives you an opportunity to really interact with your team, or to spend time calling your family or something like that. Like, it really zeroes in on the idea of you spend those times away from work and actually bettering yourself in some capacity. So if you're looking to get buy-in, do something small, and it doesn't matter what level of the organization you're in. Do something small, and when you can see change. So the change that we saw was we were becoming more productive as a team together, and because we were spending time doing these activities together as a group, so our communication and our trust was increasing, and we were able to bring that change in productivity and show that data to senior management as part of our final pitch for an overall mental health program. So sometimes you really do have to gather the information and be that change that you want to see. And when that change comes, show everybody that you can. And that's the best way to get buy-in from the senior management level if they're not 100% on board with an idea that you have, or a type of program, or the idea of a mental health program in the first place.
So start small, show some results, and then go back for buy-in. This seems like a great one for you, Devin, because you talked about leaders going first. So leaders first in modeling mental health and self-regulation. So this is a great one, because I think that this came up clearly as a takeaway from you, is that you have to demonstrate it. I'm actually going to move to the next one, because I want to make sure we get a lot of good questions. You talk a lot about the first step, asking your team what they're doing, but what do you do when an employee answers that they're not doing all right?
So that's a lovely question. So this one doesn't make me nervous because I'm a therapist by training. So I realize that a lot of people in the leadership positions aren't necessarily coming from that background. But it all kind of boils back down to, again, that at the end of the day, when they're not doing okay, that people always just want to be seen and heard. So it's not about trying to fix the person necessarily. It might just be sitting down and listening to what they say, to giving that connection to them. And sometimes that's enough in itself. Now, sometimes there's next steps you take as a leader, like you can refer to all the workplace resources. So I would say definitely do kind of this, like, in the psychological first aid, we call it look, listen, and link. So I'm looking for people in distress. I'm listening to what's going on for them. And then I'm trying to link them with resources. So knowing what those are in your workplace becomes really important, so that you can provide those and you don't become the therapist as the leader and confounding those roles. And also just being there and listening and connecting can sometimes be enough, and people panic on what they need to do. And a lot of times it's just what you need to be.
Yeah. I love that idea of just be present. And then if it gets to be too big for you, then you don't have to respond right there. You can engage others to help. What about this, Stephanie? What about when people are not into Zoom, that they don't, that's not a safe place for them to talk, to be, they don't want to have their cameras on, and there's all this pressure to sort of show up on Zoom all day long?
Absolutely. And depending on the size of your team, I know if it's possible, if you notice someone's really quiet on a Zoom call, or maybe they're not showing up to ones that aren't mandatory, picking up the phone and having an old-fashioned phone call. Sometimes I actually much prefer now with all the Zoom calls, I'm like, just get me off video. I want to have a connection and have that phone call. So picking up that phone call. And again, I think we're all linking to the same thing, it's listening. So when you get on the phone, really listening for what's going on for that person. And when you say, how can I support you? Which I think can be the next question. If you think there might be a struggle, what do you need right now? What support do you need? And really listening for, it would be really great for me to have, a later lunch hour, or it would, so that I could spend time with my kids. But listening, I think, is number one, and finding those ways off camera, one-on-one, that often can really benefit your introverts.
We only have a couple of minutes technically left. I'm going to go a little bit over time, but I'd like to invite our panelists to, we can have you go into the dashboard and respond to these. The ones that we don't get to, I think it'd be great for us to not leave people hanging here, because there's some really good ones. I don't know if any of you have had examples of when there's been a lot of terminations or furloughs. How do we have people feel, don't have survivor guilt, feel comfortable and not have fear in there? How do you have trust in a culture that has been letting people go? Who would like to take that one? It's quiet here. I'm bringing it up because I think that, one of the things that we probably do is we are so worried about what people will think we don't say anything. And there was this old view that, if I don't say anything, then you're not thinking anything. I don't know if you guys remember this belief. Like, we don't know what to say about those terminations. Let's say nothing, because if we say something, then we're going to get people worrying, versus understand the worry is happening. So I just thought I would just give a teeny bit of advice here, which is that, coming out and talking about the reality of the finances and the decisions that have to be made and how difficult the decisions were. And I think if you're treating people humanely and that you've given them support on the way out, and that you don't hide it, and you don't have people find out, people left by having their email bounce back, or all sorts of weird stuff people do, this creates all this craziness. And so while I know there's a feeling of confidentiality around terminations, everyone is going to find out. So even if you can have a respectful list and you can feel that you have done what you could to help people land properly, that's really the best you can do. But I do think, shrouding changes in org structure and secrecy and having people feel confused is the #1 way to lose their trust. And to believe that people are not strong enough to hear the truth is actually incredibly insulting. And so I think it's really important that, you are as transparent as you possibly can be while you respect confidentiality. But that's a big thing here, is to talk about it and not to pretend it didn't happen. I was wondering if there's any other, I'm just going to look at my word cloud here, if there's any other word I want to pull out as our thought of the day. Essential, it's here. Yeah, we're talking about building communities. How do you keep things up in the long run? This was one of our top thoughts. What do you do when, people are tired of the coffee, cassette kind of thing? What's the next layer of that kind of connection beyond what we know everybody's already been trying? Anyone, maybe you could take that one, Devin?
I'm just thinking on that one. I think probably it might be as simple as asking my team, like getting their feedback on what they need or what they want, because I think it's going to be fluid and changing as we go through the next year or however long when we're getting creative. So I think just checking in with people and literally asking them what can we do. We just had that conversation at my workplace, and we came up with that we needed to take a half-day team day. So we're going to take a half day and we're going to do some resiliency training as a group, and we're going to share a COVID-friendly lunch. And that's our kind of next connection piece that some of the team came up with. So they just talking.
I think asking people that is a really good point. I think that you can get a lot. I know we did one thing where we had an all company meeting and we weren't sure about the agenda and everybody had to come. So what we decided to do is when everybody came on is say, this is your free hour. This is it. Okay, so we blocked it for you, knowing that people don't feel good doing that. And if people wanted to use it to respond to email or take a walk or do whatever, but the whole point was they were not allowed to book a meeting with anybody else in the company for that next hour. And I think that, the amount of joy in the chat, just from that one thing, from not making it a Zoom hour and not making it a coffee break, but just say, you're free, we know you're, and you can't book any of us, go away, was a kind of thing that I think you can surprise and delight people with small things. And back to what Greg was saying, that are cost effective as well. Always this perception of cost associated with joy, when I think being seen, being heard, being given a break is great. So I thought if we're going to walk the talk before we wrap up today, and I do encourage our panelists, we'll get back to you to respond to the exchange, we'll share the links, is that we maybe take 4 deep breaths. I know that 4 big belly breaths, those really rejuvenate you for the day. So I thought we could just close our eyes, everybody on. I know this is not traditional, I've never done this before, but I'm thinking I want to follow this example of if we can't do it for ourselves, we can't expect others. So just to close our eyes and to take 4 big deep breaths before we sign off today to cleanse our brain of all those stress chemicals. So I'll be quiet now. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and I really enjoyed this chat. Thank you to our 3 panelists, to Stephanie, to Greg, to Devin, and for all your amazing resources. I'm looking forward to those links as well, and we'll be getting back to you soon with all of this information. Thank you to everybody. Take care.